Now, this really becomes important when you have venture capital or an outside investor in the company. An outside investor is going to want to see a properly organized company for the two reasons that I cited at the top of this video. Various principles in the company in terms of CEO, chief marketing officer, vice president, so on and so forth. So what a limited liability company does, or an LLC, kind of exactly how it sounds, it limits the liability, so that there is what's called a corporate veil around the company, and no creditors can pierce through the corporate veil and reach over to the assets of the personal shareholders of the company. And this is why limited liability is one of the primary reasons for company formation or entity formation. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing technology startup formation and structuring. This is also called company formation. This is kind of one of the first steps that a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses undertake in their entrepreneurial journey, which is to set up a company so that they can operate under the company umbrella. So let's talk about that today, and I want to share with you some high-level kind of concepts to think about as you go about your entity formation task for the company. Now, one of the first things to think about is, why do we form a company? Okay, surely right now you can walk outside and start doing business. Let's say you're selling t-shirts, for example. You can go right now to the street and sell t-shirts and collect money and do this for years and years, assuming that you have all the licenses and whatnot. But you don't need to actually form a company to be doing business. You can certainly, as a sole proprietor, you can do business and earn money. But a lot of people do form a company, and the types of companies that are predominantly formed are either LLCs or corporations. So these are either a company formed in any state within the United States. It could be Delaware, it could be California, it could be Texas, Wyoming, Montana. It doesn't matter. Wherever you form a company, you usually form it either by way of a LLC or a corporation. Now, there's other types of company structures, such as a limited partnership, for example, but we're not going to get into that because the primary type of companies that startups form is either an LLC or a corporation. So the reason or the benefit for forming a company and doing business under the company are a couple. And here's the top benefit: limited liability. What that means is that as a shareholder in a company, if a company gets sued or otherwise faces any type of liability, the shareholder can be potentially personally liable for the liabilities of the company. For example, if I own shares in the company Coca-Cola, and for some reason Coca-Cola gets sued or otherwise goes bankrupt, and Coca-Cola owes other people money, the people who are entitled to that money might come after me as a shareholder in the company, as a stakeholder in the company, and try to collect money from me. In a small business example, it's a lot more simple. If your small business is out of funds and cannot cover its liabilities, the creditors may come after the owner of the business and ask for liability directly from the owner. So what a limited liability company does, or an LLC, kind of exactly how it sounds, it limits the liability, so that there is what's called a corporate veil around the company, and no creditors can pierce through the corporate veil and reach over to the assets of the personal shareholders of the company. Therefore, in the Coca-Cola example, because it's a corporation, it has this kind of corporate veil. And therefore, if Coca-Cola gets sued and goes bankrupt, the shareholders of Coca-Cola, like Warren Buffett, for example, one of the most famous shareholders of Coca-Cola, is not at risk of losing his other assets because of Coca-Cola's bankruptcy. I mean, imagine if you're a shareholder in 15 separate companies, any one of them can potentially go bankrupt, and technically the stakeholders or the creditors from that company can come and try to reach and kind of come into your personal assets, or to try to kind of pull money from the assets of the other companies in which you're a shareholder. So it can get very messy very quickly, and this is why limited liability is one of the primary reasons for company formation or entity formation. The other top benefit to forming a company, primarily for companies or startups that have multiple founders, is organization. This is just kind of memorializing in writing the rules that govern the company. For example, if more than one person owns the company, the founders are wise to put in writing who owns what percentage of the company. Is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 90-10? Is it 75-25? Is it 49-51, for example? So who are the shareholders of the company, and what are the percentage owners of the company? These things are usually memorialized in the operating agreement of a limited liability or in the bylaws of a corporation. So it's put in writing essentially, so there's no confusion in the future in terms of what percentage of profits are you entitled to pull from the company. So that's another primary benefit to company formation, which is the memorialization of the respective roles in the company. Other formalities are also included in the bylaws or the operating agreement, or essentially reduced in writing, such as how you guys vote, for example, on certain important topics, such as, let's say you want to do a merger with another company. Let's say your company wants to purchase another company, right? So in that case, there might be a vote taken, for example. So there has to be certain rules that govern the way the company is operated or governed, so to speak. What are the procedures, for example, for creating a board of directors? What are the procedures for removing a member from the board of directors? What is the procedure for removing and appointing a CEO, for example? Who is the CEO? Who is the secretary? Who is the CFO of the company? These are all things that are going to be memorialized in writing and allow a company to be better organized and better operated with more clarity for all stakeholders. Now, this really becomes important when you have venture capital or an outside investor in the company. An outside investor is going to want to see a properly organized company for the two reasons that I cited at the top of this video. One is the investor wants limited liability because that investor doesn't want to have to be liable for the potential damages or liabilities of the company beyond its assets. And if the investor has other assets, for example, like homes, for example, or other businesses and cars and jewelry, the investor doesn't want those assets to be potentially reached by any creditors of your startup company. Therefore, the investor is going to require a limited liability structure, whether it's through a corporation or an LLC type of entity formation. The other thing the investor is absolutely going to want to see is properly formalized and memorialized rules about who owns the company, who controls the company, what are the percentage splits, what are the protocols for voting, what are all the protocols that we discussed and are covered in the bylaws and the operating agreement of the company, and what are the respective roles of various principals in the company in terms of CEO, Chief Marketing Officer, Vice President, so on and so forth. So those are the main kind of things that entrepreneurs are well advised to think about when they go into the entity formation step. Just to kind of review, the most important thing is to limit liability so that your own personal assets and the personal assets of your investors are not up for grabs in the event the company goes bankrupt. And the second most important aspect is to have a properly formalized, structured company that has rules and has in writing who owns the company, what percentage they own, and what the respective roles of everyone in the company is. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to TopStartups on Instagram and YouTube. I'm David Nima, one of the top trademark and technology attorneys in the country and founder of TopStartups Academy, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.